Welcome to Case Vault, where every case has a crack, a contradiction, a missed clue, a detail that should not be there. Today we're looking at a Bavarian teenager who spent 30 years pretending to be other people, and the one thing the people closest to him never noticed. Boston, 2008. A man in handcuffs is led into a federal building. The papers are calling him Clark Rockefeller. He has a daughter named Ray. He has a wife, an apartment, a club membership, a name nobody in his life has ever questioned. None of it is real. He isn't a Rockefeller. He isn't an American. He's about to be exposed as one of the longest-running imposters in modern U.S. history. And the place his story really starts isn't Boston. It's a backyard in California where workmen had dug up a young man's bones 13 years earlier. What closed the case on him wasn't his fame or his face. It was 2 plastic bags in a hole in the ground. Start at the beginning. 1961. A small town in Bavaria, in what was then West Germany. A boy is born to a working-class family. His parents are Simon and Irmgard. His name is Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter. By his late teens, Christian has decided that whatever Bavaria has to offer is not enough. In 1978, at 17, he flies to the United States. He lands in New York and makes his way to a town in Connecticut. He talks his way into the home of a local family, the Savios. They treat him as an informal exchange student. He stays a few months, then they ask him to leave. He moves to Milwaukee, gets adopted in name only by a family there, and enrolls at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Around the same time, he stops being Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter. He becomes Chris Gerhardt. It's the first name change. It will not be the last. In 1981, in Madison, Wisconsin, Chris Gerhardt marries a young woman named Amy Dunke. She thinks she's saving him from being drafted back to Germany. She thinks they're going to build a life. He leaves her the day after the wedding. She doesn't see him again for years. What he wanted was a green card. He got it. That's the pattern. Walk into a life. Take whatever's there, walk out under a different name. By 1983, he has resurfaced in Southern California with a new identity. He's calling himself Christopher Chichester. He says he's British. He says he's the 13th Baronet of Chichester. He's neither of those things. He's a 22-year-old from Bavaria. But in 1983, Southern California, a man with an English accent and a title is somebody people invite to dinner. He settles in San Marino, an old-money suburb near Pasadena. He audits film classes at the University of Southern California. And he rents the guest house at a property on Lorraine Road from a widow named Ruth Sohus. Everyone calls her Didi. Didi lives in the main house with her adopted son John, who's 27, and John's new wife Linda, who's 29. John is a quiet computer programmer. Linda draws comic books. They've been married less than a year. They live a few yards from the guest house. And in early 1985, John and Linda Sohus disappear. Here's the version of the story Didi is told. In February, John and Linda say they're flying to New York. There's a job interview, some kind of high-level government work that John can't talk about. Linda says she'll be employed by the same agency. They'll be moving across the country. A few weeks later, a postcard arrives at the house. It's signed Linda. It's been sent from Paris. After that, nothing. No call, no letter, no address. Didi accepts the story. Her son has a government job. The secrecy explains the silence. He'll surface when he can. The person filling in the details for her, when she gets confused or worried, is her tenant, Christopher Chichester, the man in the guest house. He's the one telling her about the interview. He's the one explaining the silence. He's the one a few yards from the empty main house. By July of 1985, Chichester is gone too. He doesn't give notice. He doesn't say goodbye. He just stops being there. Didi finally calls the police about her own missing tenant. They take a report. Nobody finds him. There's no formal missing persons case for John and Linda. As far as Didi knows, her son is alive, working for the government, and embarrassed about how little he can say. The guest house sits empty. The story sits with it. And right there, in 1985, the case goes quiet. If you want to watch it come back, stay with me. And if you like a story built on one overlooked detail, take a second and subscribe. Christopher Chichester resurfaces on the other side of the country. He's in Greenwich, Connecticut. He's not Chichester anymore. He's calling himself Christopher Crowe. He says he's a television producer, that he worked on the Hitchcock revival in the mid-'80s. He works in finance, briefly. He's hired by a small investment firm. He's fired a short while later for one of the strangest reasons in this whole case. The social security number he gave the company turns out to belong to David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. It is not, of course, his number. He had picked one out of the air, or out of a magazine, and never thought it might already be famous. He's let go quietly. He moves to a different firm under the same name, and keeps going. Then in late 1988, Greenwich police pull him over for a traffic stop. He's driving a white Nissan pickup truck. The truck is registered to a young man in California named John Sohus. The officers don't know who he really is. They tell him to come down to the station for a longer conversation. He doesn't. He sells the truck quickly to a church acquaintance, under one of his other names, Chris Crowe, and slips out of Greenwich. Police in Connecticut and California eventually piece together that Chichester and Crowe are the same person. They can't find him. He's already become someone else. And the truck sits in a Connecticut driveway, a young man's truck from a house where the guest house tenant had vanished, unconnected to anything for years. It would later turn out to be the first physical thread tying the man to the Sohus case. At the time, it was just a sold pickup. By the mid-'90s, the man has changed names again. This time, he picks something audacious. He starts telling people his name is Clark Rockefeller, as in the family, as in the bank, the foundation, the museum. He's vague about the exact branch. He hints. He lets people fill in the gaps themselves, and almost nobody asks. In 1995, he meets a woman named Sandra Boss. She's a McKinsey consultant, brilliant and direct. The kind of woman you do not lie to twice. He marries her in a Quaker ceremony on Nantucket the same year. He gives a long, made-up full name. She believes him. For 13 years, Clark Rockefeller is Clark Rockefeller. He moves through Boston society, joins a private club, raises a daughter, runs the household finances. Sandra Boss earns the money. He spends it. He files her taxes. He tells the accountant he's her brother. By 2006, she's noticed enough wrong things to hire a private investigator. The investigator reports back that her husband is not who he says he is. But the investigator can't say who he actually is, just that the man she married does not exist. She files for divorce. She gets full custody of their daughter. He gets supervised visits in a hotel room with a social worker present. On the 27th of July, 2008, one of those supervised visits takes place on a sidewalk in Boston's Back Bay. He pushes the social worker out of the way, grabs his 7-year-old daughter, and gets into a waiting SUV. By that afternoon, his face is on every news channel in the country. The FBI calls it a kidnapping. The mother begs him on television to bring her daughter home. Nobody knows where he is. While the manhunt is on, a writer in San Francisco named Edward Savio sees the photograph on the news. He stares at it. The face is older. The hair is different, but he knows that face. 30 years earlier, when Savio was a teenager, his family had hosted a Bavarian boy named Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter for a few months in Connecticut. Savio picks up the phone and calls the FBI. He tells them the man on the news isn't a Rockefeller. He's the German exchange student his parents asked to leave in 1979. On the 2nd of August, 2008, FBI agents find him in Baltimore. He's bought an apartment under another new name, Charles Smith, Chip Smith. He paid cash. about $450,000 in the week he had her. His daughter is found unharmed in the apartment. He's taken into custody, and the FBI does the one thing he had spent 30 years avoiding. They take his fingerprints. 2 weeks later, the Bureau confirms a match. A print lifted from a wine glass he used in Boston matches a print in an immigration file from the early 80s. The name on the file is Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter, born 1961, Bavaria. 30 years of identities, and the print on the wine glass had never changed. And once he had a real name, California opened the drawer it had stopped opening years before. The Sohus file, the Lorraine Roadhouse, the guest house, the pickup truck, the postcard from Paris that didn't sound like Linda, and the bones. Because in May of 1994, the family that bought the Lorraine Roadhouse after Dee Dee died had decided to put in a swimming pool. The workmen started digging in the backyard. About 3 feet down, they hit plastic. Inside the plastic were the dismembered bones of a young man. He had been struck twice in the head with a blunt object. He had been stabbed 6 times. His body had been cut into pieces, packed into plastic bags, sealed in a fiberglass box. In 1994, they couldn't prove who the bones belonged to. There was no jawbone, no teeth to match dental records. John Sohus had been adopted, so the family didn't have biological DNA on file. The bones were stored. The case went cold. A young man who had vanished in 1985 was, 10 years later, an unmatched skeleton in a sheriff's department evidence room. Now, in 2008, the man who had been the guest house tenant had a name, and the cold case investigators reached back into the evidence bags from the 1994 dig. Something had been buried in the hole with the bones, not just the body. 2 plastic bookstore bags. One was from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee bookstore. The other was from the University of Southern California bookstore. Investigators pulled the records for every person who had lived at that address. The Sohuses, the neighbors, the family who later bought the house, the man in the guest house. Only one person had attended both schools. Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter had spent his Milwaukee years at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He had audited film classes at USC as Christopher Chichester. 2 bags, 2 schools, 1 man. And here is the part that should stop you cold. He had cycled through identities for 30 years. He had changed names every time a thread tightened, but the bags from his own schools were still in the hole. 2 cheap plastic bags, the cheapest things in the hole. He had stripped his own life every few years, but he had never thought to clean out the rubbish under the body. In 2010, DNA testing against a biological relative finally confirmed that the bones were John Sohus. Now they had a victim with a name, a killer with a name, and 2 bags that named one of them as the other one's neighbor. If you're still here, you're watching the right part of the case. The smallest things in a hole in the ground named a man with 7 names. Take a second now and subscribe. The verdict is next. In March 2011, the Los Angeles County District Attorney charged Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter with the first-degree murder of John Sohus. He had already been convicted in Boston for kidnapping his daughter. He was serving that sentence when the murder charge landed. The murder trial ran across March and April of 2013 in a Los Angeles courtroom. Prosecutors showed the jury the truck, the postcard, the fingerprints, the 2 bags. On the 10th of April 2013, the jury convicted him of first-degree murder. He was sentenced later that year to 27 years to life. Linda Sohus has never been found. He has never been charged in her disappearance. Step back and look at the whole thing. He had been the husband, the tenant, the father, the producer, the baronet, the heir. He had never been himself in any of those rooms. The case closed on him through the smallest things. A print on a wine glass, 2 plastic bags in a hole in the ground. He had been somebody else his whole adult life. 2 bags from 2 schools named which one of his somebodies dug the grave. A man with 7 names, 2 bookstore bags, 1 conviction. A Bavarian teenager became a Rockefeller, and a grave full of bones named him through 2 plastic bags. That's the case. If you see things other people miss, hit subscribe. Case Vault drops a new one twice a week, and the next crack is sharper than this one.